This is March 29, 2017. I'm Wanda Sobieski, and we're here in the offices of Sobieski, Messer, and Elledge. It's my privilege to interview Martha Black, also known as Marty, for the Knoxville Bar Association. For the record, what is your name?
Martha Susan Lowe Black, Marty Black is how I am known by everyone, I think.
And Marty, when were you born?
September 18th, 1945.
Where?
In Maryville, in Blount County.
Okay, and that's a small community.
Yes.
Who were your parents?
My father was Ernest B. Lowe. He had an opportunity to come to Maryville College and where he could work his way through school, and that's how he got to Maryville.
Okay.
He otherwise was from the coal country of Tennessee and West Virginia. My mother was Esther Carlson Lowe. She was born in the United States of parents who had just immigrated from Sweden. She, for the most part, was raised in Rhode Island, but did go back and spend, from ages 10 to 12, she lived in Sweden.
Wow.
So that was a very strong part of my growing up. My grandfather, my Swedish grandfather, was the only grandparent I had, and he was living in Rhode Island. And so I was very close to him, and I'm still very close to the Swedish relatives in Sweden.
You visit them regularly?
Yes.
And what did your mom and dad do?
Mother was a registered nurse, and this is back in the 30s. She did some public health nursing, and then the aviation industry opened up, and she was the first stewardess from the state of Rhode Island.
Wow.
And we got a job flying for American Airlines.
Is that how she met your dad?
Well, that's what brought her. She was based in New York and Chicago and flew to Memphis, flew to Knoxville. Daddy's had a brother who did air traffic control for American Airlines out of McGee Tyson. At that point, the airlines did their own air traffic control. And one day she was flying the Knoxville to New York route, and he said, "You need to meet my brother who's going to get on your plane." And at that point, Daddy actually was working for American Airlines in New York. So yes, they met on that flight. Daddy invited her to dinner, and she said, "Well, I don't know. I will be tired when this flight is over. I'll call you if I feel like going out." And fortunately, she did.
Oh, good, good.
And then they settled back in Maryville, which had been a very nice place for Daddy when he went to college, and it was a good community for them and for me to grow up in.
And what was it like growing up in a small town in Tennessee?
It was very small. The community was very close-knit. I could walk to school. I walked to elementary school. I walked to junior high. I didn't walk to high school. It was a little bit further, and my friends were walking. Knew everybody's parents. I went all the way through school, from kindergarten through high school, with the same group of folks, which was really, I think, helpful in growing up. It was helpful ultimately when I came back to Maryville as a lawyer. I mean, I had a lot of credibility because I knew so many people knew me.
Okay, all right. And you've been very active in the community.
I have been very active in the community.
Okay. Were there any family ties to the legal profession?
No, none whatsoever, except that my parents had some friends who were lawyers, and there were neighbors who were lawyers, but I really didn't know what they did exactly.
When you were in junior high or high school, did you ever think about being a lawyer?
Never thought about it.
Okay.
No.
So what did you do when you graduated from what high school? Maryville High?
From Maryville High School in 1963.
And then where did life take you?
Okay, well, I was really, the opportunities for women for female students were really limited. There were ball teams, and I played basketball when the half court. Women could only run half a court, so I played guard. But the goals ultimately were to be queen of something or to be a cheerleader, and I was really...
You were both.
I was both, but I was really kind of frustrated with that, and I really wanted to get past the queen contests, and I looked around. I interviewed at a couple of schools nearby, but one point sitting, waiting and going through an annual, I saw more queens and decided that I wanted to get past that. So my dictionary had a list of colleges, and it listed women's colleges. I thought, well, that might be where I need to go. And my grandfather was still in Rhode Island, and we'd gone to Rhode Island every August. So New England was not a foreign territory. And I decided that really that the women's college was the right place. Looked at Radcliffe, Wellesley, and Mount Holyoke.
And you decided on which?
Well, Mount Holyoke. Radcliffe was a little too urban. Wellesley, all the students wanted to tell me was where the phones were and how they set up their dates and how. Mount Holyoke in western Massachusetts, just far away from everything. It looked to me like there'd be no distractions. And so I chose Mount Holyoke, and it was probably too remote, a little bit too. I got a very good education. It was a new level of academia that I had never experienced, and I really loved that. Great opportunities to study art history and literature.
Was there a reading list that you had some trouble getting?
Oh, well, there was
college?
actually, yes. So this is 63. My reading assignment before I started was Betty Friedan's The Feminine Mystique. And it wasn't to be had in Knoxville. So
Or Maryville.
Oh, certainly not in Maryville. And it wasn't, no one in Knoxville had it or offered to get it. So Daddy and I went to Nashville, and I got a copy of The Feminine Mystique. And that was a good introduction to college.
Okay. All right. And then did you graduate?
I did. I graduated in 3.5 years. My Depression-era parents, we knew you didn't waste anything, including time. So with a couple of summer courses, I was able to finish in 3.5 years. So.
Wow. Did you like going to a women's college?
At the time, it was just right for me. I think probably, hopefully now, women are more integrated into the co-ed schools and are more respected, so I think there's a lot of advantage to that too. I mean, you're going to be working with men in the world. You might as well be learning to deal with everybody.
So now we think women can be more than queens?
I think women can be more than queens anywhere. I think anywhere, yes.
So when did you first get interested in the law profession?
I know at some point, probably my last year of college, I was interested enough that I asked a friend who was in law school about it, someone from Maryville who had known me. And his response was, "Oh, Marty, you don't want to be a lawyer. You wouldn't like being a lawyer." And I just accepted that and thought alternatively, and proceeded to study American history. When I graduated, I was married very early. Ended up in Texas. I was studying history at Rice, since I had assumed, well, maybe I really didn't want to be a lawyer. And I'm not sure where the thought came from, but that's when I first had the thought.
Okay. And when did you revisit that?
Spent a couple of years at Rice studying history, then ended up back in New York. I finished everything for my master's degree except my thesis. I was ill. My marriage ended. I had a 2-year-old daughter, and it was apparent that I really needed to seriously think about what I could do to support myself and Charlotte. And law just immediately came back to me. And I knew that the University of Tennessee was right here in Knoxville. My parents were still in Maryville, and I knew I could come back to Tennessee. They would be supportive and helpful, which they were, and so I went without giving it any other thought. I mean, went to the law school, and Miss French was at the desk, and I asked, "Will you take women?" Mm-hmm. And she said yes. I think this was in March, and by June I had taken the LSAT and gotten my transcripts in and started school in June.
What year? 71?
71, I think, yes.
Okay. Yeah. How many women were in your classes?
My recollection is that there were 4 when I started in the summer. 3 continued. I think there were 9 women in the whole school. That's my recollection.
Wow. And did that change much by the time you graduated?
It had changed some by the time I graduated. Of course, now I think the majority of the students are female, but it was slow. It was slowly improving.
Did you graduate early from law school as well?
Well, I did. I went straight through in 9 quarters.
Okay. And how would you describe your experience in the law school?
Going to UT Law School was one of the best decisions I ever made. I just loved the Socratic teaching. First, it was a shock when the assignments were, 6 pages. I had come from a background where I would be assigned a book or 2 for the next class per course. So I thought, well, 6 pages, 9 pages, that's nothing. And then I learned the level of analysis of those pages was just extraordinary. Mm-hmm. And I loved the give and take with the professors, and really enjoyed the practicality of what I was learning.
Did you feel that you, as a woman, were well accepted by the faculty?
I really did. I mean, I may have been a bit of a novelty, but I did feel they were very happy to have me there. Forrest Lacey, Martin Feerick, Joe Cook, and then John Sobieski, who came when I started as a student, I felt were very supportive.
Okay, that's good. Did you know David Black while you were in law school?
Well, actually, my first quarter wasn't the first week, but I would say by the end of the first month, maybe like the 3rd week, I was in the stacks. And
that would be in the library.
In the old library stacks. And one of my classmates came up to me and said, I just got out of the Army, and an Army buddy of mine has just come back to Maryville, and I think you should meet him. And I said, well, that was, who was that? He said, oh, Dave Black. Called him. I said, well, I've known David Black all my life. I did not know he was back in Maryville, but shortly thereafter he called to see if he could take me out to dinner, and that was one of the other best things that ever happened to me. And David was a great friend and really helpful when I was in law school, just to have somebody to talk about what I was doing. Mm-hmm. he would help remind me when I was talking about common law and when I was talking about a statute. And he could fill in some things that we weren't really discussing in school. So he was very supportive all through law school.
Okay, and eventually you married.
And eventually, in 75, I graduated in 73, and in 1975, we married, yes.
Okay. And as you came to the close of your law school career, did you start looking at what kind of opportunities were you looking for? Did you want to practice in private practice or government? Or
well, I realized I needed a job.
Right.
And I wasn't quite sure what I could do. Durward Jones, my tax professor, kept pushing me to interview. And, I did do some interviewing, but it
what were your experiences?
It was difficult. Charlotte was 4. I had those responsibilities, and I knew whatever else I needed some flexibility. Interviewing, I found there was virtually no flexibility that anyone wanted to offer, and I just didn't. I didn't feel there were jobs that I really could do. And then I heard that the business school was hiring for a business law teacher. And I just knew that would work for me. I would like to be teaching. So I submitted everything to them, interviewed. That looked like I had really found something I could do. But I needed a recommendation from the law school. And I had had a really good relationship with Forrest Lacey. And I went to Forrest for a recommendation. And every now and then Forrest would lean back and he'd think. And when I asked for I thought he would be very happy for me that I had found the right job for me. He just sort of said, I need to think about that. He said, I can't recommend you for that job. Oh. And my heart sank. I mean, I couldn't imagine why he would say that. And then he said, if you want to teach, I want you to teach here.
Wow.
Give me a little time to talk to the faculty. And I think the dean was a little reluctant, thought he was willing to hire me as an instructor. Forrest and some of the other faculty held out for me to be hired on a tenure track position, which is what they offered me.
Okay, and
so I graduated in August and started teaching in September at the law school.
And so how many women were tenured at the law school then?
Well, there had only been one woman hired to teach at all, and she was not tenured. So I was the second female hired and the first tenured.
Wow. Okay, and you, I take it, enjoyed teaching.
I really did. It was daunting. I mean, when I started, I will say that first day in September of 73, when a month out of school and being enrolled, working on the bar exam, and I walked into the room. I mean, I think I can still place most of the students in the seats they were in. I was so panicked, but I enjoyed it. And it was a good choice for me.
Okay, all right. And then were you? I think we skipped something I wanted to ask you about, and that was in law school. Were you active in any of the extracurricular activities?
I was. Moot court was a great experience for me, and our team won the regional competition, and then went on to New York, and that was a great experience to get the practical experience. It was very nice getting to work with Joe Cook and John Sobieski. I do remember when we won in Mississippi, won the regional competition, the judges came around to congratulate us, and one of them told me he really liked the way I dressed. I dressed like his wife.
Did you take that as a compliment?
Well, I would have taken any. I was so happy we had won. I thought that was okay.
And that was the national moot court team.
Yes,
specifically.
Yes, yeah.
Okay, all right. And then, what can you tell us about your experience as a teacher? You were the first woman or second woman, first woman tenured. But what was it like day to day being in such a minority in the faculty?
Well, the faculty were really supportive. I never felt a problem with the faculty. I mean,
that's great.
The students, I probably had 2 or 3 students who asked or complained about things that they might not have to another professor, but the worst being one student accused me of not. I had for 2 quarters of legal writing and the same grade. The student received the same grade both quarters, and the student accused me of not reading the second quarter's papers. And I hinted, I said, I think that's a serious academic charge. Picked up my phone and called the dean and said, I think we need to take this to the dean and let him sort this out. Well, of course, by the time we got to the dean's office, the student had no interest at all in discussing it. And I really doubt that would have happened with one of the male professors. But
what about salary and benefits?
Okay, yes, all right. The EEOC equalized my pay twice in 8 years. I taught 8 years, and twice they found I had the lowest salary and the highest teaching load, and my salary was equalized.
What about other types of assignments in addition to heavy teaching load?
Well, I did have a number of administrative assignments. I did work with the moot court team, but Joe Cook was also doing that, so I was really just helping, and John Sobieski was still working with that. I was the minority student counselor, which was had a great. I loved doing it, but it took a lot of time and a good bit of responsibility. With the minority students, I worked with them going to the Frederick Douglass moot court competition, and actually we won.
Wow.
And did a couple of the Frederick Douglass teams did really well. So I did that. I found also there were so few women in the whole university, and very few tenured women. Once I was tenured, I mean there were just a handful of tenured women in the entire university. So there were a lot of university-wide committee assignments that I ended up having.
Well, now while you were teaching, you married David.
Yes.
I think you said it was 1975.
Right.
And then you had another child?
Yes.
What was that like?
Well, I mean, Elizabeth was born in June of '79. I taught pregnant, which was certainly a novelty for the law school. But they gave me a microphone. I couldn't stand up and walk like I tended to do. I had to sit on a stool, and but taught right up to the week before she was born.
Wow.
And then after she was born, particularly the minority students that I was working with that spent time with us were just great with her. And
okay. Did you receive any assignments while you were in the hospital?
Well, yes,
After her
actually,
birth?
I did. I had just delivered Elizabeth, I might say, at Fort Sanders. I felt like I needed to be there because I really thought I would probably go into labor while I was teaching. So
Right.
it was the choice of a doctor in a hospital was dictated by being close to the law school.
Okay.
And yes, Bill Brown came over and announced while I was still there, which of course was a very short period of time after she was born, and announced that the dean had signed me up to chair the Commission for Women for the whole university.
Wow.
I did get a postponement on that. I said, how about give me a year? And so then the following year I chaired the Commission for Women for the whole university. And that was interesting. We had a number of issues. Probably the most pressing was getting support for Pat Head and her basketball team.
Wow.
That got no good practice time. I mean, the worst practice, only the practice time that the men didn't want did she have available. Didn't have enough shoes to make it through the season.
Incredible.
Not a lot of support on away games. And it was interesting doing that.
So the commission really helped the athletic program as well as
I think so, yes. I mean, it was the commission was there to respond to any questions raised by women, and Gloria Ray was the director. She was
Wow.
really happy to let the commission help do,
I haven't heard
Something.
that name for a while.
Right,
That's good.
right.
That's good. So did you continue teaching after that?
I taught till 82, so Elizabeth was about 3. And I retired from teaching for a number of reasons. I still really enjoyed the teaching. I had done some appellate work for David during the summers, and I really liked that. And
I should just say here, David had his own law firm. in
David
Maryville.
had his own law. He had gone
Kaiser.
into practice with Ben Kaiser
Right.
in Maryville. Ben was ready to retire at that point. I had found I really enjoyed doing the appellate work with David, and I increasingly felt like I needed the practical experience to be teaching. That
okay.
I just felt like I should know that I could do it. I should know how to do it. I should be able to do it. So I retired and started practicing with David. Ben Kaiser had done a lot of estate work, and that was something I was interested in.
You taught tax.
And I had taught tax. I
Gave
had
me my lowest grade.
well, I'm sorry.
It's okay.
And I really liked David's attitude toward the law and his approach, and it.
Okay.
So I joined him, and
So how were you accepted in the legal community in the small town of Maryville, and was there a difference between Maryville and Knoxville acceptance?
well, Knoxville, the law school had been so supportive, and although there were moments in Knoxville too, I'll backtrack just a minute. I mean, one of my activities while I was teaching was hosting the National Moot Court Competition regionals, and I had great support from the judges. Judge Taylor gave me his courtroom, said he'd do anything, but I still needed some other judges, so I contacted local attorneys. And at that point, I was tenured. I had been there for a while. I had been active in the community. I called up one potential judge, a lawyer, and explained who I was and what I was calling about. And the response I got was, "Honey, you should be home doing the laundry." So it wasn't perfect in Knoxville.
That would would be in the late 70s,
Yes,
early 80s.
the early 80s, right.
How about
I had, back to Maryville, I had good support, although one of my parents' friends, who was a lawyer, had told them that it was really nice that I was going to law school, but I would never be able to practice in Maryville. Mm-hmm. So that was in the,
nice.
70s. David, of course, David's always been my biggest supporter. I also had great support from Judge Wayne Oliver, who was on the Tennessee Court of Criminal Appeals. Judge Oliver's son and I had gone through school together, and he really liked the idea that I had gone to law school and that I was practicing, and he was very supportive. So I didn't, I didn't find a lot of difficulty. The lawyer who had told my folks that I couldn't practice in Maryville, I think never quite got over the fact that I was, but his partners did.
Okay, well that's good. Were there any challenges to practicing, not so much necessarily from the local legal community, but otherwise? I mean, you had to get past being the queen.
Yeah, I had to get past, and I think I did. I mean, I had, by that time, a lot of people knew me, and I had done well at Maryville High School. I mean, so I had some credibility. David was wonderful in introducing me to clients. Mm-hmm. I mean, as I say, David's always been my biggest supporter. He would assure them that I could do just about everything, including walking on water, if that's what I needed to do. And that helped. I mean, it helped. And there were a few folks who preferred, I think, not to have a woman. But with David's introduction, it was easier than I think it would have been otherwise.
Certainly. Tell me about the first time you argued before the Tennessee Supreme Court.
Well, I don't remember the first time. I remember the biggest case I argued. Okay. In, I think,
77.
77. Yes, this was this is while I was still teaching. David had discovered, I mean, and he figured this out on his own, that the Industrial Loan and Thrift Companies Act allowed these small loan companies to charge exorbitant interest. I mean, some of the interest was in excess of 50%. The Tennessee Constitution had a 10% limit. So David litigated and won. I mean, when you really looked at the reality of the figures, there was no way to get these interest rates under 10%. Mm-hmm. So he won. And of course, all the banking industry was on the other side. That case was appealed to the, and we had it certified as a class action, ultimately. So the case was appealed to the Supreme Court, and the argument was set in Nashville. And we got Ron Mears was also working with David on it. So the three of us got over there, and the courtroom was packed with the banking industry, lawyers, and legislators. I think I was the only female there. I don't remember that for sure, but
did you argue it?
I argued, and I got to the podium, and I noticed there was a floor mat at the podium that had very large perforations. I mean, fortunately, I noticed it, such that only a male Florsheim heel could be placed on that mat without getting caught in the perforations. So I argued, and I never wore stilettos, but yes, I had heels on, and I literally had to argue that case standing on my toes. had I put my heels down, I would have fallen.
Oh my.
So I did. It was, gave new meaning to being on your toes when you're arguing before the Supreme Court. But we won.
Oh, good.
And in the decision, the court said that the case had been very well briefed and argued, and that was
Nice.
gratifying.
Nice.
Ultimately, it was a Pyrrhic victory because all those suits that were there were at the same time organizing a constitutional convention.
Oh, okay.
And there was a constitutional convention, and the 10% rate disappeared.
Uh-huh.
Yes.
Well, one thing I've noticed when I began practicing, which was a little bit later, was when I would get to especially Court of Appeals facilities, if I had to find a ladies' room, I had a problem.
Right. Well, there was not a ladies' room at the Supreme Court either, but the clerks were wonderful. They just gave me a key and said, make yourself at home.
Okay. Well.
But yeah, that was a problem for quite a while.
Okay. Now, both of your daughters, Charlotte and Elizabeth, have become lawyers.
But they have.
Is that what you hoped?
I was really surprised, especially with Elizabeth. But they chose it. We didn't. Neither had any interest in coming to Maryville or doing small town practice. Charlotte graduated from UVA and practiced for about a year outside of Washington, and then decided that she wasn't sure she wanted to do the private practice. Got a job with the Department of Justice that was just perfect for her.
So
Clinton had set up the community-oriented policing services program, and she was one of the original employees there. Had a wonderful mentor that she worked with, and she's still there. She's the last remaining original employee with the community, it's the COPS division.
Right. Right.
Elizabeth really surprised us. She did a master's degree in international relations first, and that's really what we thought she would do. But then went on to law school. She clerked one summer in Brazil, and that seemed to be enough international legal work. She was very interested in environmental issues. So she started out practicing environmental law in New York on Wall Street, and then about 5 years ago found an opening in Seattle, and she moved out there doing environmental work with a law firm. And then last year an opening appeared. She is now the environmental counsel for the Port of Seattle.
Wow.
And she enjoys that.
Wow. Were your girls in Washington, D.C. or New York during 9/11?
Charlotte was working at the Department of Justice, and a friend in the CIA called and said, you need to get out. And she walked out to Alexandria, across, said, we don't know what's going to happen. The DOJ building was very close to the White House.
Wow. That must have been very frightening.
It was.
I'm certainly glad it turned out well.
It did turn out well.
All right. Do you have any regrets from your years serving the legal community?
I do have one major. I will say I loved practicing. I loved, and my practice was person to person. I mean, it was not a corporate practice. And I really loved working with individuals and providing, I think, good quality services. I loved being part of a law firm that intentionally tried to provide good jobs for the women who were working there, and David is supportive as I was with that. What I really regret is I feel strongly about women's reproductive rights, and while I have lobbied, it's always locally, it's been pretty unsuccessful, and I wish that I could have had more of an impact, because I really believe women need the right to control their bodies, and we need to speak up and do what we can.
In fairness, you've been pretty active in the community, though.
I've been very active in the community. I set up the foster care review board and worked with that for a number of years. I worked with the Blount County Children's Home, worked a lot of years with the Blount County Library, and helped get our new library built.
That's a beautiful new facility.
And it's nice, but reproductive rights have not, I wish I could have had more of an impact.
Okay. Well, Judge Pamela Reeves encouraged you to do this interview. I know we're sort of forcing you to be here against your comfort level.
I'm a pretty private person.
I know. So, but what would you want your legacy to be?
Well, Pam did encourage me to do this. It said that several members of the class had been talking about the fact that I had influenced them. I had encouraged them to go on and finish school and become lawyers. And I hope that was true. I think maybe just being there also at the law school when I was had an impact on the men that came through. I mean, from the time I was there, they all knew there were women out there to work with.
Right.
And so I think that had an impact on the community. I did have an opportunity to do several really good commissions for the Tennessee Supreme Court that I enjoyed doing. I hope my clients, I think I left a legacy of good, thoughtful, efficient legal services with my clients.
I forgot to mention, you were on the Supreme Court for a brief period of time.
Yeah, yes, I did sit on a special Supreme Court when there was a challenge to the election of the Supreme Court. More importantly, I had a great opportunity being on the Futures Commission that the Supreme Court set up. Got to work with Lyle Reed, and Connie Clark was on that. And that was John Siegenthaler was the chair. We held hearings all over the state on all issues involving the Tennessee legal system, and I was really honored to get to be a part of that.
Wow, that's really great. So what changes would you say that you've observed for women, other than the numbers? Obviously, a lot of more women are involved in the profession, but in attitude, opportunity, in the profession itself as a result
I think
of
the profession has accepted women, and women have done very well. I mean, I think they've had a very positive impact on the nature of the profession, and I think are very well accepted at this point. I think the public is aware of the quality of services women can provide. I think the men at this point are perfectly willing to work alongside a woman.
Okay. And is there any particular event that you recall as being special from your years of service? I know you've had an opportunity to have people come to your home.
Oh, well, yes. Actually, there was. One very, very exciting event. You had arranged for Gloria Steinem to come speak at the Susan B. Anthony Day program, and after the program, we invited you and John and Gloria to come back to our house, and John and David totally served us. They let the three of us sit in the living room and visit, and the two of them served us dessert and coffee and did a very nice job doing that. And that was a highlight that you made possible.
Well, that's sort of a change of role position,
Right.
I suppose,
Right.
For what's normal. Well, thank you so much. Is there anything else that you would like to add, or to something message to the future young women or young men?
Well, I think the profession of law does provide a wonderful opportunity to serve the community. Whatever your interest is, whatever part of the community you're interested in, a good legal education is helpful. And I will just always be grateful to having turned up at the UT College of Law when I did.